Gosh, Pocket Ronnie made me enjoy eating triangles. So welcome back.
Okay, now we're going to be using factoring to add fractions. Remember, when you add fractions, you have to have a common denominator. We're on 5B1, number 6, and we have this problem right here. You have to have a common denominator. Before you do that, factor any denominators you can. It will help you to see what your common denominator will be. X squared minus 4, difference of two squares. It factors into x plus 2, x minus 2. So you can see this has an x plus 2, this one has an x minus 2. So our common denominator needs to be both of those parentheses multiplied together. So this first fraction already has that common denominator. So that one doesn't need to change. So I'm just going to rewrite it as 2x over x plus 2, x minus 2. Okay, all these other fractions have to have that same denominator as well. So for this one to have a common denominator, we need to multiply it by a x minus 2. That's being multiplied. This one, we need to multiply by x plus 2. Because now we'll get those, now we'll have those common denominators. Okay, so now I'm going to write my new fraction. This 8 has to be distributed to both things. Watch your sign. Distributing the 8x, 8x times x, 8x squared. 8x times a negative 2 minus 16x. And that denominator is x plus 2, x minus 2. Does it matter which order I write them in? No, because multiplication is commutative. Okay? That negative right there, you're going to have to really watch that. Okay? If you want to put that negative with the 4 and then make this a plus sign, you can. In other words, you could say this. That's the same thing. Okay? Or, if you just want to leave that negative there, then what you're going to have to do is you write that negative here, and we're going to have to distribute it to everything here in a minute. Okay? So here, this has to be distributed. So that would be 4x plus 8 all over x plus 2, x minus 2. This whole thing of the 4x minus 8 is like in parentheses, okay? All of these numbers that are connected by a subtraction or addition, it's like it's acting as one number, okay? So this negative has to get distributed to everything that's behind it. Anytime you have a subtraction sign, anything that is behind it, the subtraction sign has to get distributed to that, all right? Now that we have a common denominator, we can just write our numerator over that. I'm going to go ahead and write my denominator as x squared minus 4, because when you multiply x plus 2 times x minus 2, you get x squared minus 4. So here I have a 2x plus 8x squared minus 16x. Distribute this negative. That would be a negative 4x, negative 8. Okay, now I'm going to combine my like terms. So I'm going to write my 8x squared first. 8x squared, I took care of that. 2x minus 16x is a negative 14x. Adding another negative 4 would be a negative 18x. I hope I'm doing all my math right. I took care of those. 2x minus 16, negative 14, negative 14, negative 4, negative 18. And then I have my minus 8. Boom. And then x squared minus 4. Okay, I could factor out a 2 out of here, but even if I factored out a 2, it wouldn't cancel with anything in the denominator. And if I factored out a 2 and then kept factoring, it won't factor anymore to cancel with anything in the denominator. So this is your final answer. Okay, now let's look at 5D12. Okay, look at all your denominators to see if anything factors. That doesn't factor anymore. That doesn't factor anymore. This will factor. Okay? How do I factor this? This is not a difference of two squares. Remember, the first thing you always look for is to see if you can factor anything out. Okay, so it's not a difference of two squares because you wouldn't be taking the square root of 4x. Okay, so you look, always the first thing is look to see, can you factor something out? Yes, I can factor out an x. So if I factor out an x, then that would just leave me at x here minus 4. And that's as far as that will factor. So now you're ready to make a common denominator, and you can see that this would be your common denominator. So for this first fraction, you need to multiply it by an x to get that denominator of x times x minus 4. To this fraction, you need to multiply an x minus 4 to be able to get the x times x minus 4. Okay? Again, that negative is what we're going to have to watch out for. So for this first fraction, 5 times x. 5x all over x times x minus 4. The second fraction. Now I'm going to work this one differently. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this negative in with the numerator and then make this a positive. Because basically a negative divided by a positive is a negative, which would have made this a negative. So anytime you see a subtraction sign, if you just want to move it into the numerator and then make this a positive, that's okay too. So this 9 has to be distributed to both of those things. Negative 9, so then this will become my plus right there, and then in my numerator, negative 9 times x, negative 9x. Negative 9 times a negative 4, positive 36, all over x times x minus 4. My last fraction already had the common denominator, so I don't have to change it any. So now that I have a common denominator, I can combine my numerator. So 5x minus 9x plus 36 plus 8x all over x times x minus 4. Combining my x's, 5x minus 9x, negative 4x. Plus the 8x will be a positive 4x, and then plus 36. I got everything that I needed. I got that, that, and that, and that. And then the book goes ahead and multiplies out the denominator, so that would be x squared minus 4x. And you can see, even if I factored out a 4, if I factored out a 4 of the numerator, it would not cancel with anything in the denominator. Do not cancel this 4 and this 4. These terms are connected by that addition sign. This is connected by the subtraction sign. This acts as one whole number. That parentheses acts as a whole number. Only parentheses can cancel. You cannot cancel this to this because these are being added, these are being subtracted. You can only cancel things that are multiplied. So that would be your final answer for this one. Okay, we're now on page 5B1 and we're doing problem 5. I'm going to show you the two things that are going to give you some issues. That subtraction sign right there and that subtraction sign right there. Okay, honestly, the first thing that I would do is put that subtraction sign in the numerator right there and put parentheses around that and make that a positive. That's the same thing. Then doing this will remind you that negative has to be distributed to everything behind it. Anytime you have a subtraction sign, that subtraction sign has to be distributed to everything behind it, every term. Okay? So the first thing you want to do is factor this to figure out your common denominator. That's a negative, so that tells you you have a positive and a negative. X, X. Factors of 6, 6 and 1, or 3 and 2. I can see I'm going to use 3 and 2. This is negative 1, so my 3 needs to be negative. That will give me a negative 3, positive 2x. If you don't factor these correctly, it's going to make these problems difficult. So, alright, so now you can see this one needs a x minus 3 multiplied to it. X minus 3. Okay? This looks very similar to x minus 3, but it is not x minus 3. When you have something that looks similar, but your numbers are changed, okay, look, you can see this x is positive, but over here it's negative. This 3 is negative, over here it's positive. So basically my signs are changed. My signs need to be the opposite. This needs to be a negative and this needs to be a positive. When that's the case, you basically factor out a negative 1. Okay, so I need to factor out a negative 1 from this denominator. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm just going to rewrite this here. 7 times x, or 7 over x plus 2. 4 over, I'm going to factor out a negative 1 right there. Okay, so that negative 1 is going to stay. So if I factor a negative 1 out from here, this now becomes a negative 3, and that becomes a positive x, because Negative 1 times a negative 3 is a positive 3. Negative 1 times a positive x is a negative x. And it gives me back what I'm started with. But now this matches that. Negative 3 positive x. Because I can rewrite this as x minus 3. X minus 3 is the same thing as negative 3 plus x. See, all my signs are the same. Positive, positive, negative, negative. I just changed around the order, so now it looks like that. Okay? So now I can see, okay, going back to making common denominators. This one needs an x minus 3 multiplied to it. So this one now needs a x plus 2 multiplied to it. And then our last one, fraction should not change. I still have that negative out in front. And then here I'm going to have x plus 2, x minus 3. So now let's do my new fractions. This 7 has to be distributed to both of those. So 7x minus 21 all over x minus 3, x plus 2. Okay? Plus, this 4 has to be distributed. So that would be 4x plus 2 all over, there's my negative 1, x minus 3, x plus 2. Now let's distribute this negative to everything. Plus negative 2x minus 2 all over x plus 2, x minus 3. Okay, my cameraman, who is my son, Joshua, pointed out this should have been 4 times 2, which is 8. So guess what? He got an extra credit point on his next Algebra 2 test. Yes, he's going through Algebra 2 right now. If you're watching this 10 years from now, he won't be. Anyways, okay, now let's go to the second fraction here. This negative 1. Alright, if I told you that you had negative 4 over 5 or 4 over negative 5, you would agree that that's the same. A negative divided by a positive is still a negative. A positive divided by a negative is still a negative. All I'm trying to tell you is that when you have a fraction, as long as one is negative and one is positive, it doesn't really matter where your negative is written. Okay? You have a negative here, that's the same thing as putting it in the denominator. Sometimes in a book you'll just see it out in the very front like this. Okay? As a negative 4/5. Negative 4/5. This is still negative 4/5. Negative 4/5. These are all the same thing, they're just written differently. All that to say is that this negative 1 in the denominator, I'm going to move it up to the numerator. And that's okay to do because I have a positive divided by a negative. Well, if I move my negative 1 up here, I still have a negative divided by a positive. Because now I want to distribute that negative 1 up here in my numerator. I don't want it in my denominator because I want all my denominators to match. So that's why I'm going to move it up. Now that I have a common denominator, I'm just going to rewrite all my numerators. 7x minus 21, distributing this negative 1 would give me a negative 4x and then a negative 8. And then here I have a negative 2x and a negative 2. All over, I'm just going to multiply this back out. X squared minus x minus 6. Alright, now let's combine our x's. 7x, okay, 7x minus 4x is a 3x. 3x minus 2x is 1x. X. Negative 21 and negative 8 is negative 29. And negative, let's see, this, okay, negative 21 and negative 8 is negative 29. Negative 29 and negative 2 is negative 31. Okay, I went wrong somewhere, so I've got to go find my mistake because this should be x minus 30. Okay, I see where my mistake is. Go back up here to this step. This is how simple it is to make mistakes in Algebra 2. Even the teacher can do it. I can make mistakes. I'm not perfect. This is a negative 1 out here. Negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2x. Negative 1 times a positive 1, negative 1. That should be a negative 1, not a negative 2. So come down here to this step. This negative 2 should be a negative 1. Now we have negative 21 and negative 8 is negative 29. Adding another negative 1 is now 30. So x minus 30 over x squared minus x minus 6, if I said that correctly.